Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figure It Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it. Hey guys, it's Adam here. Once again, I am in my office to do just kind of a vlog-style video, so I hope you guys are enjoying these. Based on the last few videos, you guys said you're kind of cool with it, so the audio is better at least. So for now, we're just going to continue to do stuff in here. We'll also, of course, do our main channel videos that are out there. Obviously, that isn't stopping. I just thought, for vlog purposes, this is just kind of easier. Anyway, so today what we're going to be talking about was just kind of announced at the time I'm making this. E3. I'm going to pull up the article here. That's another benefit being in here is I can look at the screen. E3 tweeted, this is the quote from them, "After more than 2 decades of E3, each one bigger than the last, the time has come to say goodbye. Thanks for the memories." E3, the famous trade show of the video game industry, one of the staples of it for news and events, has officially ended. And that's the news in of itself. And I don't think there's anyone who didn't see this coming. You know, the last few years in particular have been pretty bad as far as E3 was concerned. The pandemic didn't do them any favors. And of course, the constant leaks and everything. And then, I mean, I know because I went to this thing a few times, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They were upsetting a lot of content creators because they had their own internal leaks that would lead to people getting doxxed. That never actually happened to me. I remember that happening to Jason Metal Jesus. And he texted me at one point. He's like, "Yeah, here's my new number," because like all of a sudden everybody's like harassing me. Kelsey Lewin, same thing. Like a bunch of people were contacting her. A bunch of people I knew who got their info leaked, they updating their numbers. I wasn't on the list, which was interesting because I actually went to E3 multiple times. So we'll talk about this for a little bit, and then if you guys will indulge me, I'll just tell you what it was like to go to E3 and my personal stories with that. But yeah, so E3, it's not shocking, honestly, that this happened. Every one of these companies does their own private media event, like, because they have greater control over it. I think this was kind of the original sin, per se, was Nintendo when they originally pulled out like 10 years ago. That was kind of the beginning of the end. And then over time, you know, Microsoft was kind of the last to hold out. I know Sony pulled out at some point. Microsoft eventually did. And then other companies, you know, I think last year, what did they do? Like that virtual version of E3. The idea was, I don't even remember all the details of the last couple ones because they clearly didn't really know what to do with it. But yeah, it makes sense that this isn't going to be a thing anymore because each one of the major developers and publishers just prefers to have their own self-controlled show. And that they'll release them when they feel like doing them. You can kind of either credit or blame Nintendo for that one because they were the ones who just wanted to have a lot of control over it and wanted to release it on their own time rather than having to have something come around in June and have a predicted, you know, scheduled show that everybody could, you know, kind of coalesce around. I'm going to miss that element of it. Because it was nice knowing there was going to be this basically Christmas and summer type of vibe where the summer would come around and we all knew there was going to be some big series of, you know, announcements and exciting things to look forward to. But the history of E3, it was a trade show. You know, originally it was only for industry people. You were only supposed to go in. It was like media for magazines and publications that were supposed to go and, you know, effectively understand what was happening and then echo that news onto various local outlets, whether, again, it was magazines, local television, whatever it is. With the advent of the internet, it started to diffuse the need for that, and that's eventually the point we've gotten to. It's just kind of a relic of a different era. But I will admit, I'm going to miss it as far as the excitement goes as a fan, but I can also tell you some stories on a personal level. So I went to E3 3 times. I'm actually going to show you guys. I've got my badges. I still kept them. The first one I went to was in 2017. There's my badge. I was industry. I had multiple badges every year. I would get industry badges. I would get media badges. I would get guest badges. I would get standard badges. Like this, it doesn't really matter. I have a lot of friends in the video game industry, and these badges were easier to get than you think. So with the right person, you just have a random badge. So the next year, you know, I had the 2018 badge. And then, of course, 2019 badge. And I thought I would take a few minutes, if you'll indulge me, to tell you some stories about these. So from the 2017 one, that was my first time ever going there. By 2017, the event wasn't just industry. In fact, I think that was the first year they had decided to allow the public in. Now, the public had a different experience with it, because if you were in the public, you would just kind of go in and you wait in lines to try demos of things. So being industry or being media was still beneficial, because you effectively would cut the lines, or you get to hang out in the lounges and all that sort of thing. So what happened to me in my case is back in 2017, I used to work a lot with Ubisoft. When I was still with Game Society Pimps, we would, you know, they loved us, especially me. They would bring me to like things all over the world. I've done videos on a lot of that. I still have friends over there, but you know, Ubisoft, like any video game company, has revolving door stuff. So like, you know, staff moves. You know, you think of a corporation, but it's actually a bunch of people inside of it, and a lot of those people are constantly changing jobs. There were people we had met at Ubisoft that thought we were fun, and so they invited me to E3. And what that means is that they pay for the flights, they pay for the hotels, and then they give you access to their loft. So they would have like a private loft set up, and in there they'd have like fully catered, they'd have all the games that they had demos of. You could just play and hang out. And then, you know, if you wanted to capture footage and make videos out of it, you would do that. And for us as a channel, that was a huge win, because you're getting early access to early games that nobody else was really getting, so you can make videos on it. So everybody kind of benefited from it. So we had a lot of fun doing that, and it meant I got, you know, to see their stage performance, you know, like where they come out and they talk about their upcoming games, which was actually really cool, because I didn't get to meet, but I did get to see Shigeru Miyamoto. I was like 5 feet away from the man. If you look back at that 2017 conference when they were announcing Mario Rabbids, I was sitting in, I don't remember, it was the Orphan Theater or something like that. I don't remember what the name of the theater was. But the one where they had that 2017 Ubisoft conference, you know, Shigeru Miyamoto like ran down the stage. He was like right there. And then later when we were all at the Ubisoft loft, you know, like he was there. But you know, they kind of had him under lock and key. You know, only like Ubisoft upper echelon people were allowed to talk to him, not just some YouTuber who gets the privilege of hanging around in there. But I was very close to the man, which was cool. But yeah, it was very interesting to me, because it was like maybe the only time in my career I got to be the whole Hollywood wine and dine thing, just because you got access to all these really cool things. In fact, Ubisoft, again, was really nice. That year was the same time they were doing South Park: The Fractured But Whole, and they made me a custom shirt. That's actually me on the shirt, and I kept that because I just thought that was really cool. But yeah, that was a really cool year. The next year, I wasn't expecting to be able to go back. You know, it was just kind of, I thought it just a one-time thing that they were cool enough to do that, because I still remember the language of their email when, because they used to invite me to events all the time, and they asked if I was going to be at E3 that year, and I was just like, I don't know how that would happen. They're like, you've never been to an E3? Oh, dude, done. Here's your hotel, here's your flight, come on out. So I was just expecting that to be a one-time thing. Next year, E3 rolls around, and the exact same thing happened. They sent me an email. They're like, yo, are you going to be at E3? And I was like, wasn't planning on it. They're like, you want to go? Done. So that was a cool year, because you got to give Ubisoft credit there. Like, they didn't have any real reason to have me there. They had, once again, at the 2018 show, they had their loft, the same idea. You know, you can go in, play games, capture footage, whatever. But that was actually a big year for Sega stuff for me. That was the year the Shenmue 1 and 2 was getting re-released. So I had actually talked to people at Sega, because I was helping them with the re-release. And I was like, I have this idea for a video, but I'm going to need your help with it. The idea, and this video exists, it's on the channel. I was like, Corey Marshall, who's the buddy of mine, who's the voice of Ryo Hazuki in the games, I was like, he actually lives in Los Angeles. So can you guys get him a badge? Because if you get him a badge, we can get him inside, and we could film a video around the Sega booth where Corey is basically just, you know, playing Ryo, and we would just go up and have him interview people and be like, yo, you know, on that day that it rained, you know, did you see where Shenmue was released? You know, like, he would ask a bunch of random questions like that. And the goal was to see, like, did people know what was going on? Did they understand this? Did they get nostalgia berries? And then we filmed it all, and, we produced it. So Sega actually, it was weird. Their contribution to that was strange, because Sega is a Japanese company, and so they have a lot of like layer cake decisions, which basically means when the Europeans or the Americans come up with an idea, they have to submit it to the Japanese, and the Japanese have to have a guy approve it, who then has to kick it up to another guy, who has to kick it up to another guy, who has to kick it up, and keeps going. And if anybody in that chain says no, then the whole house of cards comes falling down. So what they basically told me was, there's only so much we can do for you officially and unofficially. So, because they're like, by the time the Japanese approve of this, E3 will have already ended. So there's not enough time. So like, we can't get you a badge for him, unfortunately, because we'd have to get the Japanese to approve it. But if you get him your own badge, we can absolutely promise you you're allowed to hang around our booth and no one will kick you out. And we can just kind of keep pretending like you're not really doing this. I was like, all right. So that was pretty cool. They to their credit, they took the footage, they filmed it for us, and then they edited it for us, and then gave it back to me to distribute, which was cool. So they basically did like the lion's share of the work, but they couldn't pretend like they were, as weird as that sounds. I'm not going to name names of who these people were or anything, but yeah. So in that case, Corey couldn't get a badge, but I had a bunch of friends over at 2K, so I was like, yo, do you have any spare media badges? And like, here. They just gave me a few, and I just gave them to Corey, and that was that. So that was a fun year for me, being able to film that and work on that video. I also got into the Bethesda showcase. They randomly invited me into their show. The Xbox and Chris Charles specifically, he's like the head of ID at Xbox, their independent brand. He invited me in to see the Xbox showcase, which was awesome. And I remember randomly getting invited in after talking to people at 2K. I got invited into the 2K lounge. It's like an airport lounge in the middle of E3. And I remember getting to go in there and just be like, oh, I need a vacation from all this playing of video games. Let's just hang out in here and nosh on, appetizers and sushi. It was probably the most posh thing ever. And it was always a thing where I'm like, enjoy this, because this is not going to last. This is not something I deserve to be in. It was just kind of fun for me. But you have to understand something. I know it might sound like spoiled or, whatever, But these are just people. They're all just people you end up meeting as you work. I mean, a lot of them are just ends up being fans of the channel. Like, the guy, I'm not going to name names again, but the guy who invited us into the 2K lounge, he just fangirled on me because he's like, oh my God, I watch your videos all the time. What are you doing here? And I was like, oh, I'm just, hanging around. He's like, do you want to come into the 2K lounge? Turns out he's like, at the time, he was a very significant person at 2K. I had no idea. That's how you form those type of relationships. Is the beauty of E3 is that you would go and meet industry people and you'd realize you all kind of know each other without realizing you know each other. And you just make buddies. And that's how you get stuff going. That's how you're able to talk to these people in these positions, be like, here's, from the fan perspective, what I think people want. And that sometimes moves stuff along. I'll leave it at that. But 2019 was the last show I got to go to because it was the last normal year, per se, before the pandemic. And once again, it was the same deal. Ubisoft just reached out and they were like, hey, you want to go to E3 again? I was like, absolutely. So they put me in their loft. I got to see the Bethesda showcase. They invited me back because, like, once you were in, you were kind of on a bunch of lists, and then you just kind of cherry pick what is important to you. I kind of would try to go to everything I was invited to. The Xbox showcase, Sega, this was interesting. So again, they wanted to work. They were like, hey, let's do stuff. And I was like, can we do this a little bit more officially? And they were like, no, but we can try a similar thing. So what ended up happening was that that was the year they were working on the Genesis Mini. And they were like, yeah, you want to help us like do some Genesis Mini stuff? So I ended up in a bunch of promo ads and stuff for that because, they gave me a bunch of like random swag and t-shirts and stuff like that. Everybody tries to help each other out. But the big one that happened that year, the 2019 thing that I will always be grateful to that show for, was the year I met Yu Suzuki for the first time, because obviously he had gone there to promote Shenmue 3, which was only a few months away at that point. And the story with that was, so at E3 2019, I was hanging out with Corey Marshall, and I was hanging out with Bill Black. He's the guy who was basically the voice director for Shenmue 3, and we're all hanging out. And at some point, Bill's like, "Oh, let's go upstairs to the Deep Silver booth. Yu Suzuki's up there," and I'm like, do I get to go? And then Corey was like, probably not. And I was like, all right, I get it. And so then I went off to the Xbox party. Because, again, Chris Charlie had invited me to this Xbox party. So I'm just standing there. I was hanging out with some of the guys from Mega Cat Studios. They're an independent game company that does, like, NES stuff and Genesis stuff, oddly enough. And so I'm just sitting over there, and we were talking some Dreamcast indies. And out of nowhere, Yu Suzuki just walks up. And it was like, whoa. Like, I fangirled. And I think he ironically came there because he thought nobody would recognize him there. So I was hanging with his translator and his daughter just for a minute. He was cool enough to take a photo with me and all that stuff. And I was just like on cloud nine about it. And I was like, all right, that's great. That's the end of that. I've told this whole story in a separate video, but the kind of truncated version is, after that, I was just happy. I was just like, oh my God, that was the greatest thing. I went over to Chris Charlie. I'm like, dude, Yu Suzuki's at your party. He's like, really? I have to tell him how great Sword of Vermilion is. And he just like runs off. And so that was fun. But I ended up running into Yu Suzuki multiple times after that. The next day, I went to the Sega Genesis thing, as I was talking about, and I met up with Corey again. And we had this weird, like, Sega accidental reunion, because what was happening was that same show, they were also promoting Judgment, which is basically the Yakuza series, effectively. And so they had one of the primary guy who was, like, the body, like, actor for that game was there. and then we had some of the actual Yakuza guys. Then we just, I don't know, we had Corey, so we have Shenmue, and then out of nowhere, Yu Suzuki just walked into this group, so it was like this weird fusion of all these games kind of coming together. And then, so I saw Yu Suzuki, and at this point, I was like, I saw the man yesterday, and, you know, Corey was like, hey, how you doing? They chatted for a bit, and then they realized that I was with him. And that kind of opened the door to give me some credibility. So later, I was able to get a private demo with Shenmue 3, which was an amazing experience for me. And I even, oddly enough, ran into the dude at my hotel, because Ubisoft had put me in the same hotel that I guess Deep Silver had put Yu Suzuki in, which makes sense because you're only like, you want to go to the nearest hotel that's like down the street from the convention. So yeah, that was definitely a highlight. I mean, that was a good way to go out on it. Obviously, I didn't go back to it after that because they really didn't have a proper show, and the pandemic really screwed everything up. So, but yeah, it was. It's fun to have experienced a lot of these E3 memories. I'm glad I get to keep those with me, and I guess it's just kind of fun to go back and look at it. So, did any of you guys go to E3 while it was still a thing? The public version of it? Were any of you industry you got to go in? Did any of you go like years ago? You know, when it was like, maybe it was that random show they did in Atlanta once, but I think usually it was in Los Angeles. But just curious what anybody thinks about this. Are you upset about this? Are you excited about this? I don't know why you'd be excited about it. It's just one of those things where it's like, it's kind of sad because I actually got to go to this, but at the same time, every part of this makes sense. This was very predictable as an outcome. So, yep. Anyway, thank you to all these video game companies and to E3 for the memories. It was a great time. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. Check social media stuff for description: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, Travel Channel, etc. All that stuff's in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.